Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Tech Talks with Santosh, and it is 18th episode. And today we have a very special guest. Actually, he's a doctor, so I was surprised to see that. Actually, I'm going to speak to a doctor today. So Dr. Matthias Stahl, he has a PhD and he is bioinformatician, and as well as he's a data visualization specialist working at Heist.com. And during his research to find new drugs against antibiotic resistant strains, he discovered his passion for data mining, and this is how it started. He fell in love with data, and now he works as data visualization. He works on data visualization projects for web-based and static piece for print. That's amazing profile you have, Matthias. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I kind of always followed a little bit my passions and interests, and these interests changed over time, and so this is the path which came out in the end.
Yeah, one good thing is you became you did PhD and then you became doctor and then you are following your passion for data and you came back and doing something amazing. That's really amazing. And not many people are doing that.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, data visualization combines a lot of my interests. So it combines
Mhm.
research and science with mathematics, but also
Mhm.
coding and art and design. So everything is included in data visualization, and yeah.
Cool. So today we are going to discuss about Svelte, and we are also going to focus on data visualization part because this is really interesting topic. And when I saw this in Matthias' profile, I was like, okay, let's discuss about data visualization as well and how we can actually do it in Svelte. So really excited to actually discuss about it. So let's start with Svelte, right? I mean, there are a lot of frameworks which are out there. So let's can you just let us know what Svelte is actually?
Yeah. So Svelte is another framework to build front-end websites, but it is
Mhm.
quite different from all the other frameworks. So when
Mhm.
we have a look, for example, at React and how
Mhm.
React works, it is
Mhm.
actually not that reactive as the name might suggest.
Mhm.
Because React works like that you have user input, and then based on this user input, a new virtual DOM is created. And then this
Right.
virtual DOM is compared to the current DOM, and then all the changes are identified and the changes are applied to the website, to the actual DOM. And if you think of other software apart from websites that are reactive, maybe you know Excel. I'm sure most of you know Excel. Excel is also kind of a reactive software because you can
Mhm.
connect cells to each other. You can, for example, build the sum of two numbers, and when you
Mhm.
change one of these numbers, also the sum gets changed. And this is exactly how Svelte works too. So in
Okay.
Excel, there is no like virtual DOM and then everything compared what might change. So every cell is not compared because that wouldn't be very efficient. And so works Svelte like a compiler. So at build time, the whole code you
Mhm.
have written is analyzed so that in the
Mhm.
end, there is no need for a virtual DOM, but you can
Okay.
surgically adjust the website for the changes that are made. So this is the big difference. There is no runtime. So usually when you code in React or Angular or Vue, you need to ship a runtime to your client's browsers. This is not needed with Svelte because Svelte just takes your code, compiles it to plain JavaScript, which is reactive
Okay.
with event handlers and so on, of course. And this package is then shipped to the client's browsers without any runtime. And so yeah, it is good for performance, especially on devices where you don't have much computing power, like embedded devices, for example. But also for larger projects on the web, it's very cool because yeah, it has this build time compiler approach. And on top of that, it comes with a lot of other different features that we might see during our today's video, I think.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you're saying unlike Angular, where is it actually adds few bundle size, there is no cost involved. So only you are paying for the code which you have written. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. So the more components you write, of course, the larger will be your total size that you need to ship, your total files that you need to ship. But there is no additional runtime which
Mhm.
analyzes a virtual DOM on the client's browsers. This does not exist in Svelte.
Oh, that's pretty cool. And okay, so we have our first question looks like and related to this, so let's take it. So Vijay has question: is it fair to compare Svelte to Stencil JS?
Yeah, I don't know stencil.js that well. I think they go a little bit in different directions, but can't say too much about that as I haven't used stencil.js so far.
Oh, okay. I mean, as far as I've seen the syntax, it looks like combination of React plus Angular. That's the only thing I know.
Yeah, the
Uh,
syntax. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Maybe you can show my screen, then I
yeah.
can show a simple Svelte app to get a better feeling,
Yes.
maybe. So if you go to svelte.dev, this is the Svelte website where you find everything from how you get started to tutorials also. And they have some minimal examples also on the website. And just make that a little bit bigger. So this is the Hello World example in Svelte. So in Svelte, similar to React or other frameworks, you write components, and each of these components is in the end in one file. There is one root file, which is app.svelte. And these components can have three different parts. So there is the first part usually is a script part where we put all the JavaScript in. Then we have a part where we can put all the HTML. This can be just one element, like this H1 here, but it can be multiple elements. And then you can also have a style part. This is not in here because this is not styled, but this is also possible. And then you see here, this is like defining now a variable word. So this would be like an internal state variable of that component. And you can just refer to this variable by using the curly braces here in the HTML. And so hello world gets printed. And if I change, for example, now here this variable, you see that it adjusts also here in the output. So this is the most basic version how you can write a Svelte component. And of course, you can nest multiple components. This is what is shown here. So here we have, again, an app.svelte with a script. Here we import another component, which is this nested.svelte. This is just another Svelte component. Then we have now this style part that was missing in the first one. And this is just CSS as you know it. So to every P element, here is a color applied and so on. And then we have the HTML. So here, just these styles, you see it here. This is styled because we have here in the style tag P selector. And then we put in the other component nested, which works like HTML works. And when we go to nested, we see there is just HTML in. Also, this is a valid Svelte component. So it just prints out this static text. And what you can see here is that this component has not any styles. And so nothing is applied, even though this is a P element, but we have scoped styles here. So this is a little bit how it works. And you've mentioned the syntax. This is a point that some people don't like that much about Svelte, but actually it's something you get very quickly used to it. You write from time to time JavaScript, which looks a little bit weird. It's valid JavaScript, but it can look weird. Maybe we see that later again. And the second thing is we use here in our HTML like the component names directly. It is a little bit like JSX in React, of course, but this is really plain HTML. And we can do this like in this plain way because, as I said before, Svelte comes in as a compiler at build time. So this component files go into the Svelte compiler and it produces JavaScript and HTML output from there. I mean, here on the website, you can click on the JS output and then you see what the compiler is actually doing. And then you see this is the reactive JavaScript code which gets shipped to the clients then.
Oh. So this is more of like instructions, nothing else. If I see the JS output.
Yeah. So this is just a plain JavaScript code which does exactly the things here. So which recognize, okay, nested here is a component, so I need to import this and put this here in and so on. And this is all coded within the JavaScript output. Yeah. So this is basically how it looks like. And Of course, you can build very simple things like this, but you also can build more complex things. And so there are almost no limits, I would say. And it's really easy to learn.
That's cool. So in Angular, right? So if I go to Angular, we have some like for components we have some pattern to for naming convention. It's like you have to use camel case, and of course you can use any case, but they actually ask to actually use camel case with hyphen. So you have, for example, app hyphen some nested component or app. So is there any pattern here, or it's like the same which you have in examples? We can just use it as nested, and that's it.
Yeah, I think you can do what you want. I mean, we can try this out. Like let's say we call that nested one, and then we import nested one, and this is let's check that. And then we put here nested one. So let's see if that still works. Well, this seems not to work. So actually, I don't know the rules, what is allowed. So this is obviously
Okay.
not allowed because we got the type error here. Sorry, we import the wrong file. No, it is allowed. I
It is
forgot
okay.
to add that here. So
So looks.
yeah,
Mhm.
totally okay. It should be allowed because, well, it's a compiler, so this must
Mhm.
not be final JavaScript or HTML code which is valid. So this can be transformed to something else.
Okay.
Yeah,
So I mean, it's up to me whatever pattern I want to use. So it's
yeah,
not like you
yeah,
have to use specific pattern.
totally up
That's
to
cool.
you.
But of course, this also creates issues, right? When it comes to like large application, actually figuring out some standard to follow.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think
true.
everyone has to. Cool. So one more thing, I mean, so how you create production build here? So I can see, okay, you have written the code and you are saying that, okay, at build time it will just compile it and generate all those JS outputs. So how it creates production build? Do I need to write something else? Bring in some other tool, build tool, or
Mhm.
it's like built in?
No, usually you just use npm, so I can.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how you would set up a project. So you
Mm-hmm.
use this software, or yeah, piece of software which just pulls a template from GitHub and
Mm-hmm.
builds the whole project up. Then you install all the dependencies, and then you can run it for development, or you can just npm run build, and then it produces in a new public folder JavaScript files, CSS files, and HTML files that you just need to upload to your server, and that's it.
Okay.
That's the most simplest version. There is also a thing which is called Sepper. So this is like the Next.js alternative from Svelte, or
Okay.
Nuxt.js if you are in Vue. But this, I don't recommend to look deeper into that because it will die next year and will be replaced by a thing which is called Svelte Kit.
Okay.
But the idea is that you have several different pathways how you build an app. You can just build like a static app where you just have the HTML, CSS, JavaScript files. But there will also be the possibility, starting from next year, that you integrate adapters to Netlify, for example, so that a package is created for serverless rendering on Netlify, and then you
Mm-hmm.
just upload that. This will also be possible, and then you can include server-side rendering too, if you want to have that. And
Okay.
yeah, that's of course for when you do search engine optimization, server-side rendering might be a thing you want to have. This is then possible. It's already possible now with Zapper, but
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't recommend it to start with it now, as it was announced by the creator of Svelte that this will die next year and be replaced by Svelte Kit.
Oh, okay. So it's more of advanced SSR solution which they are working on.
Yeah, it also comes then like with client-side routing out of the box, for
Okay.
example. So this is not possible without external dependencies in Svelte yet.
Okay.
But when you use Zapper or next year then SvelteKit, this is then also just in out of the box, very similar to how Vue also works, that you have one
Yeah.
file per page.
Uh, next and next they do the same, right? So
Yeah, correct.
you don't have to define routings. It's like every page is a route.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
that's awesome. What else? I mean, so if I talk about reactivity, right? So I have learned about that Svelte is actually a reactive, or you can say it actually uh, tells about more of reactive programming. But if I talk about reactive programming in general, we come to RxJS, right? So we talk a lot about RxJS whenever we talk about reactive programming. So how can we just use reactive programming approach or using RxJS in React as well? Is that possible, or anyone has done that?
Yeah, I think you can. I've seen some examples of that, but I didn't come to the point where this was necessary. So
Okay.
um, let me show an example um, of a reactive program. So this is again a very simple Svelte app, and you can recognize again the script part where we have the JavaScript, and this is our HTML part. And the HTML just defines a button, and on click, and you see here the colon, this is the Svelte syntax. We want to run the function handle click, and this function is defined up here in the JavaScript part. And it just takes our global count variable, which is the component state, and adds 1 to it. And here and on the label of the button, I again have access to this count variable by using the curly braces. So when I click, I run this function, count gets increased by 1. And I do that now, and you see that it's just applying the changes directly.
Oh.
So this is how the reactivity works in Svelte. It is done in a way which is the most easiest one you can think of. So it's very imperative. So you see on click, run this function, add 1. And when I have like this global variable here, this means that this is the component state. And every time this variable changes, everywhere where I use this variable, the changes are applied. And this is basically, to come back to the compiler approach, this is basically analyzed during the build time of my application. So the compiler knows, okay, I have a button here, and in the label, I want to see the current count. So it registers an event handler that every time this count variable is changed, also the label of the button gets changed. So because of that, there is no need to have a virtual DOM which compares like, is the button still there? Is the event handler still there? And so on. And yeah, this is basically how it works. And there is a lot of different styles how you can apply this. So here we are calling a function. I mean, what we also could do is when I go to another example, what we also could do is we could use an input field. So this is that one here. And as you know, such a text input field has a value property which reflects the current value of the input field. And with the bind keyword, I can connect a variable to that value. And this is everything I need to make this value reactive. And so here in that example, I used a variable which is called $content. And this dollar, this is again special syntax in Svelte, means that this is a store. And this is not like a Redux store or something complicated. It's very simple. It's really just a variable which has some special features. I come to that in a second, maybe. But what you see here when I type now in, so like hello, I have here registered different readers that are able to read this store variable, and they just reflect what is typed into the text input field. So how does that work? So we see here that content without the dollar is imported from stores. So when I go to stores, I see that content just gets created by a function which is called writable, and writable is a functionality which is in the Svelte store repository. So this is something which comes from Svelte, and this creates a store. Content is my store for the value of the text field here. This is the initial value, so it should be empty initially. If I type hello in there, you see that hello is here from the beginning. And then when I in app.svelte, I can access the value of that store by putting the $ in front. So if I want to change the value or if I want to read the reactive value, I just put the $ in here. And then I have these reader components. So I will talk about that in a second. But here you see I call the reader component. I give it a name. This is what stands here in front of the colon. And if I go to that reader component, also this reader component imports the content store. And you see here that it just outputs its name that I gave from outside as a property. And this is possible because I have this export-led name, and this is just the definition of a property that I pass to the component. And then I have here, again, the content accessed with a $ in front so that I get the value. And this is everything I need for reactivity. So if this store changes, it just is read. It's my autocorrection. It just reads the new value in and puts it here. So this is basically two different types how you can pass on variables. So either you have a store which you can read app-wide from whichever component that imports this store. And the other way of passing this information is having a property similar to React and the other frameworks. But here you define your property by the export keyword. And this is what I mean by a little bit weird JavaScript, because usually we know the export keyword for not exporting properties, but for like functions that you use in utilities or something like that. And yeah, maybe to close this short round across the Svelte syntax, you might have seen this one here, and this is a little bit weird HTML syntax. So this is basically a for loop or an each loop, and it creates here an array. So this is basic JavaScript. This just creates an array with 10 values starting from 0 to 9. And these values are read into the I variable for each iteration. So it runs through this 10 times, and for every time it creates a reader component with a name reader I, where I is the number. And this is like reader 0, reader 1, reader 2, and so on. And so this is how you define the loops in Svelte. So you don't use, like in React, where you have in JSX, where you just use the map function, for example, to make a loop. You just have this custom syntax from Svelte here, which is, again, possible because we have a compiler here, and the compiler is able to read that and just replicates this 10 times with varying I variables.
Wow. I mean, this is this is the simplest code I have ever seen for state management and communicating between components. This is wow.
Yeah, this is the ultimate goal of Svelte, to make the reactive programming as easy as possible.
Wow. Cool. So there is a question from Vijay. So his question is as Svelte compiles to JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, web components basically. So how is the interoperability with other frameworks? So if I want to use it as a web framework, web component, sorry.
Yeah, you can actually compile your Svelte code directly to a valid web component. This is a feature of the Svelte compiler. And if you have that web component, you can, of course, integrate it wherever you like, because it's just JavaScript and HTML and a little bit of CSS. And that should run in every browser environment and framework that you like. So this is possible. There is adapters. I have seen one for React where you can directly take the non-compiled Svelte code and integrate it to React. But that has been updated for quite a bit, I think. So yeah, the easiest way, if you like to combine, is probably to compile it to a web component and integrate that.
That's good. Okay, so let's go back to the next question, and this is where I'm really excited about. So you work or you use Svelte as a data visualization tool. So we would like to actually see how you do that. So what are the features which allow you to do it?
Yeah, so before I used Svelte, I used a lot Vue actually to do data visualizations. But then I switched to Svelte, and there was one major reason. I first show you that, and then I show you an actual example of my visualization. So here I have, again, a little Svelte app, and it has this checkbox, show curve, and when I click that, it builds up this curve here.
Okay.
And when I click it again, it just disappears with this nice animation on top. And this works like that. Let me go to the HTML code. So here we have the input, that's the checkbox. Then we have the label for the checkbox. Here it is. And then I have an SVG where this path is drawn.
Okay.
And if you know a little bit of SVG, you have this path element, and to this path element, you can pass this D property, which describes your path, so which has the coordinates in and also like the information about curvature and all that. And I use here this function path line and put in some data, which just produces this path information for me. So it's not that important now to see. And what I have here is, let me go to the path again. I have not only the D property, but I have also this transition : move. And this is, of course, not some HTML assignment or SVG assignment. This is, again, an assignment for the Svelte compiler. This is the so-called transition directive. And that means here needs to be a transition whenever the visibility of this path is switched. Or not the visibility, but if this path is present or not. And this is the case when we look here at this assignment here. This is, again, Svelte code, which is similar to the each statement that we seen before. This is like now only the conditional rendering, means that when the show variable is true, then render this path. If it's not true, then just leave it out. And in between this rendering and non-rendering, there should this transition be applied. And this move here is actually JavaScript code, which is imported here on top. And I have that in move.js. So let's go to here. And this is just a simple, pure JavaScript function, which is able to make this path drawing appearance. And what it does, it uses a trick with the path length and the stroke dash array and so on to make this animation. But that's not really important. What is important to just know is that it suffices to vary one CSS property of that path, which is the stroke dash offset. And I can move this stroke dash offset from the total path length until 0, and then it will give this appearance that it gets drawn and undrawn. And what this function does, it returns just an object with a duration. So how long should this effect be? A delay. So should there be a delay upon when I click until the animation starts? And then it has this CSS property. And here we apply a function with T and U. And T and U, this maybe some of you know this from interpolators. T and U just run from 1 to 0 or from 0 to 1 during the animation. So that means we change the stroke dash offset during the animation from the path length to 0 path length when U runs from 1 to 0. And this gets reversed then every time if it's clicked on or clicked off. And this produces then from the Svelte compiler, the Svelte compiler produces actually CSS keyframes that make this animation possible. So this animation is not something which runs in JavaScript, but runs really in CSS keyframes that I don't have to code here because I don't know how long this path is, because when I change the data, also the path length could change. So these CSS keyframes are generated on the fly when I know how the build time looks like. So this is done then on the client side, of course. And the cool thing is it won't block your event queue because it's not running in JavaScript, it's just CSS which is applied. And so these animations are quite smooth, and I can also revert them during their run. And so you can write this function once. This is my own now, but there is also one which comes out of the box from Svelte, which you can use. I think draw is the name. And you can write these functions just once, and then you can use them in all of your projects wherever you have these path animations. And yeah, I just recently did one visualization, which is here publicly available on interference2020.org. And this is about interference attempts in the US elections, which just was at the beginning of November. So we have here a timeline, and all of these balloons are different events from foreign forces that tried to interfere in the US elections, somewhat attacked the US elections by that. And the major functionality of this website is that you have multiple filter options, so you can filter out cases. So, for example, I can look at all cases where something which with George Floyd maybe is in, and you see that all these paths disappear with exactly that animation that I showed you in the little Svelte program earlier. So if I reset that, you see that they come again. And I mean, in data visualization, we really like animations, because with animations, you can guide your users in difficult to understand visuals. And so here the user then really see, okay, what is happening? They are disappearing down. And so this is a filter applied. And yeah, so this is then a usage. And here, all these blue lines, they are path, SVG paths. And I just apply my drawing function to them by this, let me go back to them, by this transition directive. And that's it. So it's really easy to reuse code that you've written. And yeah, and this is where in other frameworks you have to use a little bit more complicated code to apply such animations. And here you just apply this directive to your element in question directly.
Wow. So I mean, that animation was really smooth. I mean, I have seen some animation which runs for lifetime, and they actually hang your application. But this was like, I mean, really amazing. So
yeah, so I mean here, I think this is around 80 lines. And for each of these lines, because they have all different lengths, for each of these lines, Svelte produces CSS keyframes to make this animation. So to animate the stroke dash offset, which is the CSS parameter which needs to be changed. And then these animations run in the CSS rather than in the JavaScript thread. And this is why they are so smooth, because they are not blocking each other. So.
And what about the I support? I mean, do it works on I, or is it like doesn't work? Because animation is something which has a major problem with older browser.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this depends. So if Internet Explorer understands the stroke dash offset thing, and I think it does, then it works. This runs in Edge definitely. If it still runs on Internet Explorer 11 or so, I'm not sure. I tested it once, and then there were some other parts that didn't work because, yeah, I mean, there's so much modern JavaScript which is not supported in Internet Explorer. And together with the client, we decided to not support Internet Explorer here, but it works with Edge. But it is really up to you how you implement it. And, I think this specific path animation should run in Internet Explorer.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I really liked it. So what are the different other functions which you said there are a few functions which are already built in, and we can directly use it to draw the animations?
Yeah. So for animations, there is also one which is called Fade. This is maybe the most used one. So I can just show you. We can import Fade from Svelte transition.
Okay.
And then I can use that. Here where we have transition move, I can just exchange that to fade. And now you see that it's just faded in and faded out.
Wow. That's cool.
And this is also customizable. So we can add, with that syntax, we can add an object with some additional properties. So for example, we can add an object which has a duration property, and I can say let's say 2000 seconds, milliseconds, and then
Nah.
you see that it's 2 seconds
Wow.
now. And we can also apply easing functions here. So right now, I think we can. There is one which is called cubic in out. We have to import that. I think it's that. See? And then we let me choose the move. Yeah, let's actually import the draw. So draw is the Svelte out of the box drawing thing. And then let's see what's happening here. And now you can see that when the path is drawn, it gets a little bit slower in the beginning and in the end. This is this cubic in out easing that you just overlay. And of course, you can define your own easing functions. And you can define your own transitions. There is fade, then there is also fly, and a lot others. I mean, mostly I use fade, and it's really so easy to just import it, put it on your element, transition fade, and that's it, and everything looks a little bit smoother on your website.
That's awesome. So there's a question from Vijay. So let's take that. Data visualization typically involves huge data sets. So how has been your experience working with huge data set with Svelte?
Yeah, really good. So Svelte is not the bottleneck here. The bottleneck is how much data you can load into the browser and that it still
Okay.
runs smoothly. As Svelte is plain JavaScript in the end. It depends a little bit on your JavaScript coding style that you code efficiently, of course, when you process these data sets. But usually this is running really, really good. So I've at the moment a project that I unfortunately can't show yet, but where I have a network visualization with multiple thousand nodes and even more edges between these nodes. And they are animated in WebGL. Then also this is possible with Svelte. And so Svelte has no limits there. I would say it's just the JavaScript which is the limit and the browser capabilities.
So this animation, I'm always scared to actually try animation in any different libraries, but I have used animation in PowerPoint, and it feels like I'm just using something which is already available, and it's really amazing actually. I would love to give it a try.
Yeah,
Thanks for.
definitely. So, yeah. Yeah, there's also another feature apart from the animations, which works in a similar way, and this is called actions in Svelte. And what I have here is again an app, and this is the HTML, so it has an H1, which we can see here, and then there is a little bit of a text, and there are some words highlighted, and when I hover over them, I get a tooltip. And this works like that you can see that these colored words here, like content and tooltip, they are within span elements. So here is the inner HTML. And then around it, we have the span element. And the span element has now this use directive. And then again, the name of a function, tooltippable, that I import here. And this is, from the syntax, it works similar to the transitions, to the animations. But here this is called actions, and similar to the transitions, I can provide this with an additional object, which is that one here. This object just has the property content, which is then the content of the tooltip. And now, of course, it's interesting to see how this tooltippable looks like. This is imported here from actions. So this is the function tooltippable. And these actions, they usually have as the first parameter the HTML node. So they get the HTML node, which is the span element here, where I put this directive on. And then they get the options object, where I here just pull out the content. And then I create a global component. This will be my tooltip in the end. And then I have some functions. And then I add an event listener to my node. And remember, this node is the respective span element. So I just add an event listener to that span element, which listens for mouse enter events, and then runs the handle mouse enter function. And this is the function handle mouse enter. And this creates a new tooltip. And tooltip is just another Svelte component which just defines this HTML for the tooltip. Then I can define here a target. So where should I add this new component? Should I go to the document body, for example? Here in that case, I just take the node variable, which is the span element. So I just append it to the span element. Maybe not the best style, but for demonstration now it works fine. And then I also pass properties into the newly created tooltip element, which is the content, but which is also an X and Y position. Mm-hmm. Here I can just take the event object from the event handler, because when I enter here, I know the XY position of my mouse. And I can read this out with e.pageX, page Y. This is JavaScript, as you know it. And then this tooltip is created. The tooltip looks like that. It has just these three export let assignments. So this is like just my properties. I have the content, I have an X and a Y, and I can assign standard or the default values to it like that. So if there is no Y provided, it just defaults to 0, for example. And this is the whole HTML for the tooltip. So it just has, it is just a div with some styling, because it's position absolute, and it just gets left and top styled by my X and Y positions from the mouse pointer. Mm-hmm. Then it gets a transition fade. This is why we have this nice fading effect here. And then it gets just the content that I have put in here. And that's it. There's some styling to have like the shadow around. That's it. And now I can use this action and put it wherever I want to have a tooltip. So on the first span, I do use tooltip will provide some content. And here I have the second word, which is here on the bottom. I again just do use tooltip will provide another content. And so I can very easily reuse my tooltips across any project. And this is the Svelte actions, which is very special to Svelte, I would say. And this is another reason why I love Svelte. Because you can imagine you can do a lot with these use directives, because in these functions then you always get your actual node where you have applied it, and then you can play around with that. So you can, for example, also design nice sliders, and that brings me back to this visualization again. For example, here we have this slider where one can select a range of this score. It works like that. And then the data gets filtered, and this slider, and especially the movement of these handles, this is just Svelte actions that are able to move this little circle around. So I apply to these circles just a Svelte action which handles the movement when I click and drag it.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, this is, for me, this is the two points that make the difference in comparison to other frameworks: the transitions and the actions. And it's of course very nice for data visualizations, but I think also for other projects that are not data viz really interesting.
That's really amazing. So as we are just reaching at the end of the session, I just have two more questions. How is the TypeScript support?
There is full TypeScript support since half a year or so. So you can use it as you know it from other frameworks. And Svelte itself is written in TypeScript also. The compiler is written in TypeScript, but also in your projects you can use TypeScript.
And if you have faced any performance bottlenecks, and you have any maybe content to share in case we get into some performance issues or something.
Yeah, so there are a lot of comparisons. Like it starts with comparing bundle size from Svelte to other frameworks, but also like performance. Yeah, as I meant before, as you produce pure JavaScript in the end, the performance bottlenecks are usually in your own code. So it's not what the framework does; it's more how you write something.
Okay.
And as it is the reactive content is very easy. So it's usually very easy to trace what is happening. So if I think of React, for example, and you have, I don't know, multiple use effects in your code, and at some point you lose the overview of what is happening in which order, this is not that hard in Svelte because everything is quite easily connected.
Oh, that's nice. So, yep. In case we have, I don't see any questions in the chat, but any learning resources where I can start learning about Svelte?
Yeah, the best resource is indeed the website here, svelte.dev. There is two interesting pages. One of it is the tutorial. So here you can walk through into the different concepts, and you can also try on your own here in the code editor and see what happens. So like building a simple hello world and how this is happening. And then also the concepts are explained along with these examples. And these examples are really, really good. So I learned Svelte by reading that. And if you already have then a grasp of how Svelte is working, there is of course here the API documentation, and it's very concise. And because Svelte is also not, the syntax of Svelte is not that enormous big. So and here you can, for example, okay, I want to have a conditional statement in my HTML. This would be then the if, and then you see all the possibilities along with the examples. And I would say this is the best resource to learn it. Maybe also to mention, there is also a free code camp video on YouTube about Svelte, which is very lengthy though, but that also explains everything you need to know. And yeah, if you want to do just to see what you can do with Svelte, I would recommend to go to the YouTube channel of the Svelte Society. So Svelte Society is like a loose community of Svelte lovers. It's growing bigger and bigger. And they have had this year 2 times a so-called Svelte Summit or Svelte Society Day, where a lot of Svelte coders showed off their cool apps and what they did with Svelte in short videos. So if you go to the Svelte Society YouTube channel, there you can find them. And it's really cool what people have done with it, also for inspiration. And then they also show the code, and then you see, okay, this is very easy to do in Svelte. So yeah.
Oh.
Let's start with the tutorial. That's the best resource, I would say.
Okay. Let's move on to, I think we don't have any questions anymore. So this is the Twitter handle of Svelte Society. You can follow them here, and you will find the links for their Discord channel, YouTube channel, and as well as GitHub account. So you can follow them. Yep. So thanks a lot, Matt. Actually, it was really interesting session. I mean, I really liked the way it can be easily achieved. The same thing which I have actually done in multiple frameworks. So I can actually see the less number of lines of code which you have to write, and how easily we can achieve the same. So it's really interesting. And next thing is, I mean, we are done almost. So in case you want to promote anything on our channel.
Yeah, I mean, you can always go to my website, which is higgs.com. And there I have some other projects, and they are all done with Svelte at the moment. So and here you can have a look. I always provided them also with a description of how this was done. So this is another visualization I did, and then you can go directly to the project. And of course, to all of these projects, I publish my code. Also for this interference project, the code is public. I think you'll find that when you go to my website or to my Twitter handle at least. And because I think that's always the best you can do to approach a new language. And Svelte is a little bit kind of a language because it has some special syntax. look in others' code. How do others do it with the same language? And yeah, I encourage you to just go to my website, higgs.com, and yeah, there you can find all the different projects done with Svelte and how you can apply things that you learned in real projects.
Of Thanks for sharing it, Matthias. Yep. I have. I will share all these links in description as well, so you can the people who are watching it maybe afterwards they can actually refer to all those links, and they can just benefit from this. Yeah. So anything else you want to add, Matthias? So it was really interesting and amazing session, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we scratched now a little bit on the surface. So yeah, feel free to go to svelte.dev and look deeper into it. The transitions and the actions are just two aspects that are really cool about Svelte. There is much more. And yeah, if you have any questions, you have my Twitter handle here. So just reach out to me, write me on Twitter, and then I guess I can help you further.
Thanks a lot. Okay, so we are done. In case you have any questions later on, always reach out to Matthias on Twitter, or I'll also add the LinkedIn profile. I think he's also active on LinkedIn as well, so you can always connect him wherever you want. And on closing notes, this was supposed to be our last session for the year 2020, but Y2 actually West days, right? So this was 18th episode, and we are going to have two more episodes, and they will be mostly on Angular. So one will be on NGRX and one will be on Angular itself. So we are going to discuss about what is new in Angular. Everyone knows Angular 11 got released last month. So we are going to see what's new in Angular 10 and 11. So that's on Monday and Tuesday, because after that everyone will be on holidays, right? So I'm sure you don't want to miss that. So yep. So we will meet again on this coming Monday, 10 p.m. IST, and Tuesday as well. So meanwhile, have a great holiday, I would say. I mean, I'm sure you might have already planned your holidays, and we'll see you next year probably. So thank you.
Yeah, have a nice holiday season, everyone. And thanks for watching.
Thank you.